Clara Martins woke up to a day that promised to be unlike any other. The morning sky over the bustling metropolis of Evercrest was a mosaic of gentle pinks and soft blues, a deceptive calm that belied the chaos about to unfold. Today marked the commencement of her internship at Aurora Dynamics, an innovative powerhouse in the heart of the city known for its revolutionary approach to technology and design. Yet, as fate would have it, nothing went as planned. Her journey began on an unusually chilly morning when the bus she had boarded suddenly sputtered to a halt in the middle of the route. The engine's reluctant chug became a prelude to the misadventures that were to follow. Frustrated but undeterred, Clara resolved to continue her journey by catching a taxi. Unfortunately, her hopes were dashed when the driver, lost in his own world, took an unexpected detour, winding through unfamiliar alleys instead of the direct route to her destination. In the midst of these setbacks, as if the universe were conspiring against her, disaster struck once more. Approaching the grand entrance of Aurora Dynamics, Clara's perfectly planned outfit was marred by an unforeseen encounter with a stubborn, raised grate. Her stylish heel became ensnared, halting her progress and threatening to derail her punctual arrival. With time slipping away and her meticulously styled hair now resembling a tangled nest wrought by a fierce windstorm, she bolted into the opulent lobby, her heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and determination. At the very moment the sleek modern elevator began its descent, its doors poised to close, Clara launched herself forward with an almost cinematic urgency. "Wait, hold on," she cried, her voice echoing in the spacious hall as she sprinted like a comet racing through the void. With mere seconds to spare, she managed to squeeze through the narrow gap of the closing doors. However, her frantic momentum proved too much to control, and in her haste, she collided headlong with a tall, distinguished gentleman, clad in a sharply tailored dark suit, his attention completely absorbed by the glowing screen of his mobile device. The impact was abrupt and jarring. "Oh, dear," Clara exclaimed, her voice laced with genuine shock as she realized she had inadvertently stepped on his foot. The gentleman's face contorted in a brief expression of disbelief and pain as he emitted a soft grunt of discomfort. "I'm terribly sorry," she added hastily, raising her hands in a gesture of apology, her cheeks flushing with mortification. Despite his initial shock, he observed his throbbing foot and the inadvertent mishap with a blend of incredulity and mild irritation. Before any further words could be exchanged, the man's phone, dislodged by the force of the collision, flew from his grasp and clattered onto the floor with a resounding thud. Clara, her pulse racing, knelt to retrieve it, silently hoping that the delicate device would somehow withstand the fall. The man's eyes narrowed, and with a terse remark, he snatched the phone back, remarking in a cold tone, "Fantastic. Now my phone has decided to embark on its own little adventure." Clara managed a nervous laugh in response, attempting to salvage the situation with a light-hearted comment about the durability of modern technology, though she could not shake the sense of impending calamity. In that very instant, as he pressed a side button on the device, the screen flickered ominously before revealing a series of cracks, each one a testament to the chaos of the morning. The elevator, as if mirroring their collective dismay, jolted abruptly and came to a sudden, shuddering halt. A hushed silence replaced the previous commotion, broken only by the faint hum of stalled machinery and the soft beeping of its controls. Clara swallowed hard, her thoughts racing as she questioned whether this unexpected pause was an unintentional facet of the building's modern design. Her companion, however, seemed less amused, impatiently pressing the emergency button while his eyes searched for a solution. The abrupt stop in the elevator's ascent created a bubble of isolation, a suspended moment where time itself appeared to have taken a breath. "The elevator has paused," he remarked dryly, his tone attempting to mask the underlying frustration. "I work here, you see, and this isn't exactly the warm welcome I had envisioned." Clara, trying to inject a note of humor into the tense situation, joked, "My first day and I already find myself trapped in an elevator with a stranger? Perhaps a divine punishment for spilling coffee on my resume?" Her remark hung in the air, mingling with the soft hum of the stalled elevator, eliciting only a slight raise of his eyebrow as he regarded her with a mixture of skepticism and reluctant amusement. In the ensuing silence, a peculiar sort of camaraderie began to form. The man, now revealing a hint of amusement despite the discomfort, inquired with a raised eyebrow, "How did you end up here?" His query was simple yet loaded with the weight of unspoken shared misfortunes. "I took the elevator," Clara responded, her voice tinged with resignation and a dash of humor. The conversation, though brief, bridged the gap between two strangers thrown together by an unanticipated twist of fate. As the minutes dragged on, the interior of the elevator was illuminated by the intermittent flickering of fluorescent lights, casting elongated shadows that danced across the polished walls. The man, whose name Clara would later learn was Julian Fisher, though now to be thought of as simply a figure of authority rather than the harsh enforcer of corporate order, tilted his head upward, as if silently pleading for some sort of intervention from above. "Perhaps you are aware of the so-called emergency exit protocol?" he remarked dryly, his tone laced with both irony and a hint of exasperation. The conversation soon took a whimsical turn when Clara, embracing the absurdity of the situation, mused about stand-up comedy and the peculiarities of corporate life. "Have you ever noticed," she began, "how bosses insist on handling everything over email, even when it seems that no one ever bothers to respond?" Her words sparked a fleeting smile on his face, a rare concession to her charm amid the absurdity of their shared predicament. Though the banter was light and teasing, it carried the weight of genuine vulnerability and the desperate need to distract from the unfolding mishaps. Just as hope for a swift rescue seemed to flicker, the overhead intercom crackled to life, announcing a brief update from the building's reception. A disembodied voice informed them that a minor malfunction had been detected and that the elevator would resume its operation in roughly 5 minutes. The announcement, rather than alleviating the tension, only underscored the surreal nature of the day. The man leaned back against the elevator wall, his patience visibly waning, while Clara let out a dramatic sigh that echoed her inner turmoil. In a moment of quiet introspection, as the seconds stretched into an eternity, the man inquired, "Tell me, have you ever experienced something utterly embarrassing?" His question was both a challenge and an invitation, a bid for connection in the midst of isolation. "Why would I share such secrets?" Clara countered playfully, yet the unspoken rules of their newfound elevator camaraderie compelled her to reveal a fragment of her past. "When I was a child, I attempted something rather foolish," she confessed, recounting a memory of plunging into a hotel pool during a family vacation, an impulsive experiment driven by a naive curiosity about the nature of water's surface tension. Her story, absurd yet oddly endearing, elicited a deep appreciative sigh from the man, who remarked that while her actions were far from saintly, they were undeniably memorable. No sooner had the elevator resumed its ascent than a sudden minor jolt filled the compartment, hinting at the promise of liberation. "We're free!" Clara declared with a burst of energy, her voice infused with both relief and triumph. As the elevator doors slid open to reveal the elegant modern interior of the 20th floor, the man stepped out with an air of formality, his demeanor shifting from the casual banter of moments before to the stern responsibilities of corporate leadership. Clara hurried after him, her disheveled appearance quickly tamed as she attempted to regain a semblance of composure. The reception area of Aurora Dynamics was a sanctuary of polished marble and shimmering glass, where every detail whispered of professionalism and precision. A cheerful receptionist greeted her, addressing her as the new intern, and informed her that Mr. Fisher, the imposing CEO, wished to see her before she began her day. A shiver of apprehension ran down her spine as she was led toward a spacious office, adorned with contemporary art and sleek furnishings, a stark contrast to the chaotic start of her morning. Inside, Mr. Fisher's tone belied the earlier tension, and as Clara listened to his briefing, a spark of determination began to kindle in her heart. Clara's unconventional approach to organizing her work was nothing short of revolutionary in the analytical strategy division at Aurora Dynamics. With a spark of creativity and an inherent sense of humor, she had taken to labeling every spreadsheet with an amusing title designed not only to help her remember the contents, but also to breathe life into the cold, lifeless numbers. There was the desolate, so named because the figures in it seemed to tumble endlessly downward like a somber waterfall, and the melancholy matrix, which, with its curves and declines, evoked the image of a spiral descending into despair. Then there were the crisis columns, a fitting moniker for the stark data that spoke of inevitable ruin, a silent warning of impending bankruptcy. In her eyes, these names were not mere labels but vivid narratives that transformed raw statistics into a dramatic tale of triumph and tragedy. Immersed in her work, Clara found solace in this creative rebellion against the monotonous corporate protocols that had long stifled genuine expression. Every keystroke was a deliberate act of defiance, every note a testament to her belief that even the driest financial report could be rendered into a living story, capable of evoking a full spectrum of emotions. With each new dataset, she would assign a title that captured the essence of its numbers, turning figures into characters and charts into epic sagas that whispered secrets of success and sorrow. Absorbed in her creative fervor, Clara scarcely noticed the return of Sophie, her supervisor, who had just reappeared at her workstation. "How's it going?" Sophie inquired, her voice laced with curiosity and the expectation of progress. In that very moment, startled by the sudden presence of her superior, Clara jerked in surprise. The motion, uncalculated and chaotic, sent her cup of coffee soaring through the air. In a disastrous arc, the hot liquid cascaded onto the meticulously organized documents sprawled before her. Time seemed to decelerate as the coffee spread like an ink stain over the critical charts and tables, smudging the carefully drawn lines and distorting the once clear figures. Sophie's eyes widened in shock as she took in the scene, a perfect blend of clumsiness and calamity. "Clara, I can explain," she stammered, her voice trembling with a mix of guilt and panic. Desperation overtook her as she lunged for a stack of napkins, attempting to salvage what she could. But the damage was irrevocable. The vibrant labels that had once animated the spreadsheets were now blurred into an indistinguishable mess, rendering the intended narratives unreadable. Sophie, regaining her composure, let out a heavy sigh and gently rubbed her temples as she surveyed the chaos. "How many cups of coffee do you consume in a day, Clara?" she inquired, with a tone that mixed exasperation with reluctant humor. It was as though the mishap had unearthed an avalanche of unspoken frustrations. Clara, still flustered and red-faced, managed a whispered response that suggested she was overwhelmed by the whirlwind of events that had derailed her otherwise productive morning. With a measured breath, Sophie instructed, "Reprint all the affected documents and redo the notes immediately." A brief, silent exchange of hope and resignation passed between them. For a fleeting moment, Clara wondered if this mishap might indeed cost her the position she had so eagerly pursued, but as she saw the faint glimmer of understanding in Sophie's eyes, she clung to the possibility that all was not lost. After a long and grueling afternoon spent meticulously reprinting and reorganizing the disarrayed documents, Clara finally completed the task that had seemed insurmountable just hours before. As she carefully gathered the freshly printed reports, she noticed an undercurrent of hushed murmurs drifting through the nearly empty office. A whisper of impending judgment hung in the air as the news spread. The CEO was on his way. Julian Fisher, the formidable and enigmatic chief executive of Aurora Dynamics, entered the division with the regal bearing of a sovereign surveying his domain. His presence commanded immediate attention, and every employee instinctively straightened their posture in a silent salute to his authority. Caught in the midst of her own anxious haste, Clara attempted to present the documents with a semblance of professionalism. However, fate intervened cruelly. In her trembling state, the stack of reports slipped from her grasp, scattering across the polished floor and coming to rest at Julian's feet. His eyes, a storm of controlled irritation and bemusement, shifted from the scattered papers to Clara's mortified expression. "Good day again, Clara," he remarked coolly, his tone both measured and disbelieving. Without missing a beat, he questioned, "Do you harbor a deep-seated aversion to documents?" Mortified yet determined to salvage the moment, Clara bent down quickly to retrieve the reports, stammering, "No, sir, I cherish them immensely. There's a certain elegance in their rectangular form and printed clarity." Julian's eyebrow arched in a silent query as he flipped through one of the reports. His gaze fell upon a particularly poignant chart, its title boldly declared as the Melancholy Matrix. The revelation plunged the room into a heavy silence, each person present feeling the weight of that oddly descriptive name. Clara's heart pounded as she attempted to offer an explanation, her voice barely audible. I named it thus because to me the numbers embody a sorrowful narrative, a reflection of our performance that dips into despair." Julian closed the report slowly, his expression inscrutable, and then admonished gently, "This must be an exceptionally compelling justification." Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she improvised further. "If I were to personify a chart, I would undoubtedly be called that, for even in its despair it holds a mirror to our deepest vulnerabilities." The room remained mute, and Julian, after a long contemplative pause, sighed deeply. "Why, then, did you assign such emotive titles to our spreadsheets?" he pressed. "Because, Mr. Fisher, numbers, in their sterile existence, can be as cold as the void, so I imbued them with personality, turning them into narratives with hearts and souls." His eyes softened for a fleeting moment, and he commented, "You have described our financial reports as if they were unfolding in a grand soap opera." Despite the absurdity of the moment, Clara's sincere smile conveyed her unyielding conviction in the beauty of her system. "With an apt soundtrack, perhaps these reports might sing even more brilliantly," she added lightly. But Julian was not amused. "Change these names at once," he commanded in a tone that brooked no argument. Like a swift, well-rehearsed dancer, Clara nodded and hurried to comply, leaving Julian to exit the room while murmuring about the company's inexplicable attraction to chaotic brilliance. Shortly after the tension of the morning, as the clock edged toward mid-afternoon, a sense of exhaustion and monotony began to envelop the nearly deserted office. The soft glow of computer screens and the rhythmic tapping of distant keyboards were the only sounds breaking the silence. Overwhelmed by fatigue and seeking a sudden burst of rejuvenation, Clara decided to indulge in a moment of spontaneous liberation. She retrieved her headphones from her drawer, selected an energetic playlist that promised to ignite her dormant spirit, and pressed play. Instantly, the infectious beat coursed through her veins, and without a second thought, she began to move. At first, it was a subtle sway of her shoulders, a quiet nod to the rhythm, but soon the movement evolved into a full-blown dance. Her arms waved gracefully and her legs tapped in sync with the vibrant music, transforming the sterile environment into an impromptu stage. With each spin and twirl, she grew bolder, imagining herself as the star of a grand performance rather than a beleaguered intern burdened by endless spreadsheets. In a moment of uninhibited passion, she even commandeered a stapler, using it as a makeshift microphone, her laughter mingling with the melodic strains. However, her exuberance was abruptly interrupted by a soft cough. Turning slowly, she found herself face to face with Julian, who stood silently at the doorway, his expression inscrutable. For a suspended moment, time halted as Clara's heart raced, caught between embarrassment and defiant joy. She lowered the stapler and tried to muster an explanation, but words failed her. Instead, a shy smile broke across her face, and Julian's stoic demeanor softened, betraying a hint of amusement as he stepped back into the corridor. Later that evening, as dusk settled over the city of New Avalon, Clara reluctantly prepared for an unexpected engagement. Sophie had informed her that Julian required her presence at a dinner meeting with a potential investor at the upscale Le Opulent Bistro, a venue renowned for its refined ambiance and opulent decor, where even a single dish could rival her monthly rent. Entering the dimly lit restaurant, Clara's heart pounded as she spotted Julian seated in a quiet corner, his gaze calm yet piercing, silently awaiting her arrival. Alone with her thoughts afterward, Clara embraced the unexpected challenges with newfound resilience and hope, truly inspiring. At the elegant bistro nestled in the vibrant district of New Haven Heights, the atmosphere exuded refined sophistication and understated exuberance. Soft, ambient lighting danced upon polished surfaces, and gentle murmurs of conversation blended seamlessly with the quiet strains of a live piano. This enchanting setting, with its artfully arranged table settings and the faint clink of silverware, set the stage for an evening that promised both culinary delight and unforeseen twists. Clara stepped forward with a mixture of apprehension and resolve, sliding into the sumptuous velvet chair opposite Julian, the formidable CEO of Solstice Innovations. With a wry, self-deprecating smile, she leaned in conspiratorially and declared in a low, earnest tone, "Before you say anything, I need you to understand. I'm here under duress." Julian's eyes twinkled with a hint of mirth as he replied coolly, "Good to know." His tone was both amused and incredulous, as though her frank admission were merely part of an ongoing private joke. "I'll have the waiter write that down," he added with a dry chuckle. Clara's gaze shifted to the ornate menu before her. The exquisite calligraphy and sumptuous images of gourmet dishes were quickly overshadowed by the jaw-dropping price tags. Muttering under her breath, she observed, "My goodness, there's a dish here that costs more than my entire refrigerator. If you're tempted, you might order it, but I'd rather keep my fridge intact." Julian's smile broadened at her quip, and as he closed the menu with deliberate care, he inquired teasingly, "Do you always talk this much when you're nervous?" Always, she admitted without hesitation. I chatter when I'm excited, when I'm bored, basically any time there's a moment to fill the silence. Their repartee, imbued with wit and candid honesty, created a comfortable intimacy that defied the formality of their surroundings. Moments later, a sharply dressed waiter arrived, his crisp white shirt and perfectly tailored trousers emphasizing his professionalism, and discreetly took their orders. Left to their own devices, Julian and Clara resumed their banter, the conversation meandering effortlessly from light-hearted humor to unexpectedly deep reflections. Julian leaned forward, curiosity evident in his tone as he asked, "Have you come up with any new nicknames for the reports lately?" Clara's eyes lit up with mischief as she confessed, "I've been working on one in my drafts, the roller coaster of despair. It captures our financial ups and downs in a way that's both dramatic and oddly poetic." For a brief moment, the air between them lightened considerably. Even Julian's stern demeanor softened into a rare, genuine smile that revealed the man behind the title of CEO. Just as the conversation began to build a warm, congenial bridge between them, the carefully orchestrated calm was suddenly disrupted. When the main course arrived, the dish was a masterpiece of culinary art. Every element meticulously arranged, every aroma an invitation. However, after Julian took his first bite, a peculiar change overtook him. His face flushed a deep shade of crimson, and his eyes shimmered with an unexpected intensity as a fine sheen of perspiration appeared along his brow. Concern etched across her face. Clara leaned forward and asked, "Julian, are you all right? You're turning very red. Is everything under control? Are you perhaps allergic to something?" His voice wavered slightly as he replied in a subdued tone, "Shrimp." The single word hung in the air like a dramatic pause in a play. Almost simultaneously, the attentive waiter's eyes widened in alarm as he almost dropped his tray. "Sir, your dish contains shrimp," the waiter announced with urgency. Clara's heart raced as she absorbed the gravity of the situation. "You ordered something you're allergic to?" she exclaimed, her voice a blend of incredulity and concern. Julian shifted uncomfortably, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. I didn't notice," he stammered, his tone low and regretful. "How can someone be so distracted as to order exactly what they're allergic to?" Clara pressed gently, her worry now tinged with exasperation. "I was distracted," he murmured, barely audible. "You could have seriously hurt yourself." Before the situation could spiral further, the waiter hurriedly offered, "We can bring you an antihistamine immediately, sir." But before any further action was taken, Clara abruptly rose from her seat. With determined urgency, she reached into her bag and produced a small, neatly packaged bottle of allergy medication. Holding it out firmly, she declared, "Take this before I have to call an ambulance and have the headlines scream about how an inexperienced intern nearly cost a CEO his life at a fancy restaurant." Her tone was a curious mix of humor and genuine concern. Julian accepted the pill with a skeptical glance that gradually melted into reluctant gratitude. Within minutes, the telltale redness began to fade, his complexion returning to a more natural hue. Just then, the long-anticipated investor arrived, a silent, imposing figure whose presence reminded both parties of the evening's original, more formal purpose. Despite the calamities that had unfolded, the investor's arrival marked a subtle return to business. As the dinner came to its close and they left the restaurant, Julian exhaled deeply. "Well, that was certainly an interesting dinner," he remarked, his voice a blend of bemusement and reflective irony. Clara, still processing the evening's roller coaster of events, replied softly, "Yes, I learned a lot." With a playful raise of an eyebrow, Julian teased, "Like what? That you're incapable of paying attention to your food orders? Or that I make an excellent rescuer of reckless CEO?" A faint smile played at the corners of his mouth as he added, "I'll be sure to note that under my next report, as part of a food catastrophe prevention plan." Clara couldn't help but laugh at the remark, and as they exchanged their goodnights, a parting of words laden with both relief and an unspoken understanding, a subtle change in the dynamic between them became apparent. The night had unfolded with a series of misadventures that, while disastrous in the moment, had somehow forged a peculiar bond between them. The following morning, as the soft glow of dawn illuminated the sleek corridors of Aurora Dynamics, a reimagined corporate haven, Clara stepped into the office with a cautious yet resolute air. Despite the previous night's mishaps, she was still very much a part of the team, and Julian, for reasons she could scarcely comprehend, seemed inclined to tolerate her eccentricities. As she navigated the hushed hallways, Snippets of whispered conversation trailed behind her. Colleagues speculated about the previous evening. Some claimed they had witnessed Julian's uncharacteristic levity, while others wondered if the dinner might signal a deeper shift in company dynamics. Determined to start the day on a steady note, Clara settled at her desk, steeling herself for a calm, mistake-free morning. However, her plans were abruptly upended when Sophie, her no-nonsense supervisor, approached with a grave expression. "You're going to be working directly with the CEO this week," Sophie announced, her voice devoid of any humor. For a moment, Clara's heart fluttered with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The thought of collaborating so closely with Julian, especially after the previous night's dramatic escapade, was both thrilling and terrifying. Sophie continued, "He needs you to review several reports from the technology division and compile a comprehensive summary." Clutching her notes and folders tightly, Clara made her way to the executive floor. A realm of gleaming glass walls, minimalist decor, and an air of unyielding professionalism. In the expansive office, she found Julian seated behind a massive glass desk, meticulously poring over a report. When he looked up, his gaze met hers with a blend of scrutiny and a hint of warmth that belied his usual stern demeanor. "Are you here to engage in serious work or to recreate another scene from your personal comedy show?" he quipped dryly. Clara pressed her lips together and set the folder down on his desk with as much composure as she could muster. "I promise to focus and avoid any further blunders," she declared, though internally she braced herself for the monumental effort required. Over the course of the day, as they examined proposals for a new expansion project, an unexpected synergy began to emerge between them. Clara's astute observations on the proposals, highlighting both the promising innovations and the glaring budgetary gaps, drew genuine nods of approval from Julian. "The development team's proposal is intriguing, yet their budget estimates are far too optimistic," she explained calmly. Julian listened intently, occasionally interjecting with thoughtful insights. "And the innovation team? Their ideas are solid, but their timeline is overly ambitious, given our current resources," he concurred. When Julian finally looked up from his reports and said, "You did a good job," Clara's heart skipped a beat. "Was that meant as a compliment?" she asked with a playful lilt. "Don't get used to it," Julian replied, though the warmth in his tone was unmistakable. Their exchange, light yet laden with significance, did not go unnoticed. Whispers began to circulate among their colleagues, and during a casual coffee break, snippets of conversation hinted at a burgeoning rumor. "Did you hear? He's been calling her in repeatedly for review sessions. I've never seen him so engaged before," one coworker murmured. Another added, "There's even talk of placing bets on how long before something more develops between them." Clara, overhearing the hushed speculations, nearly spilled her coffee in disbelief. She tried to convince herself that Julian was simply her boss, nothing more. Yet, the growing attention was impossible to ignore. As the day wore on, Julian's demeanor continued to shift. In meetings, he not only listened intently to her suggestions, but also engaged with them, asking incisive questions and discussing ideas openly, a stark contrast to his typically rigid style. One afternoon, while reviewing a challenging file, Clara noticed Julian watching her with an expression that blended curiosity and admiration. "How is it," he remarked softly, "that someone so chaotic can be so remarkably efficient?" Smiling gently, she replied, "It's a rare gift, one that turns even disasters into opportunities." Julian's low chuckle in response was both unexpected and reassuring, and for a brief moment the atmosphere in the room seemed charged with a delicate, unspoken understanding. Within the corridors of Aurora Dynamics, every interaction between Julian and Clara was analyzed with the fervor of a championship game. Colleagues whispered, speculated, and exchanged knowing glances, yet Julian appeared either oblivious or entirely indifferent to the growing rumors. For Clara, however, the subtle shifts in his behavior stirred a mixture of hope, anxiety, and the awareness that their connection was evolving beyond the confines of routine corporate interactions. Standing at her desk later that afternoon, Clara couldn't help but wonder if all the chaos and mishaps that had defined her recent days might be paving the way for something unexpectedly profound. Although she was determined to maintain professionalism, the lingering warmth in Julian's occasional glances suggested that her unpredictable nature had, in some mysterious way, injected fresh energy into the otherwise staid corridors of the company. In the hushed corridors of the executive suite at Aurora Dynamics, the very atmosphere seemed charged with secretive whispers and knowing glances. Every time Clara stepped out of the CEO's private office, a space replete with sleek glass partitions and polished surfaces, the furtive murmur of conversations followed her like an uninvited echo. Colleagues exchanged sidelong looks and murmured speculations behind their computer screens, their voices barely rising above the low hum of office machinery. Though Clara tried her best to ignore the undercurrent of gossip, she couldn't help but notice that every departure from that sanctum of power was marked by furtive smirks and raised eyebrows from those who lingered in the hallways. At first, Clara told herself that she was here to work, not to become the subject of idle chatter. Yet, as days passed, it became impossible to block out the relentless buzz. One afternoon, while she was engrossed in a series of reports at her desk, she overheard a fragment of conversation that made her heart skip a beat. "I heard the CEO is getting married," whispered a voice in hushed tones from the next cubicle. Clara nearly choked on her coffee. The revelation sent a shockwave through her. Not only did it disrupt her concentration, but it also set off a cascade of new questions in her mind. Later that day, as she passed by the break room, two employees paused their idle chatter when they saw her. Their voices hushed abruptly, as if they were aware of her proximity. "Oh, you didn't know?" one of them murmured, a note of disbelief in his tone. "Apparently it's an arranged marriage, a contract between influential families, something out of a high-drama soap opera." Clara crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow. To her, the idea of a meticulously planned union between powerful families was as surreal as it was dramatic. Although she knew that such matters were typically shrouded in secrecy, the mere suggestion of a wedding in the corporate world stirred a mix of intrigue and unease within her. The weight of these rumors was not lost on Clara. Despite her best efforts to remain detached, her productivity began to wane as her mind kept drifting back to the enigmatic personal life of Julian, the charismatic and private CEO. Each attempt to focus on the monotonous flow of data and reports was interrupted by fleeting images of a mysterious fiancé, a figure woven into the tapestry of office gossip. By the time the workday drew to a close, Clara's curiosity had reached its breaking point. Determined to put an end to the uncertainty, she summoned the courage to knock on Julian's door. Inside his spacious office, where the light filtered through expansive windows and the quiet tick of a wall clock provided a steady rhythm, Julian sat deeply absorbed in a report. He glanced up for just a fleeting moment before returning his focus to the paper. Gathering her resolve, Clara stepped forward and, with a voice that trembled slightly from both nerves and determination, blurted out, "Are you engaged?" The question hung in the air like a fragile secret, waiting to be shattered. For several long seconds, the only sound was the scratch of Julian's pen as he hesitated, his eyes narrowing in contemplation. Finally, he set his pen aside and leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable yet curious. "What makes you think that?" he asked quietly, his tone laced with genuine puzzlement. Clara folded her arms and confessed, "The whole office is talking about it." Julian exhaled deeply and massaged his temples as if to dispel an invisible headache. "Office gossip spreads faster than emails," he mused. "So, you're saying it isn't true?" He paused, his silence stretching out a bit longer than Clara would have liked. "Depends on how you look at it," he finally replied, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Clara frowned at the ambiguous response. "That's a very sophisticated way of saying maybe," she teased, though her tone betrayed her lingering anxiety. Julian's smile deepened ever so slightly, as if he found amusement in the complexity of human curiosity. "And if it were true?" he pressed further. "Would that change anything for you?" His question took her completely by surprise, leaving her momentarily lost for words. "No," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper, unsure of how to complete the thought. After a few more moments of silence, Julian returned to his report as if the conversation had never been more than a passing interlude. "I think you already have your answer," he said, his tone casual yet enigmatic. Leaving his office with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, Clara felt both relief and confusion. If the engagement rumor were true, why had Julian chosen to deflect with such casual ambiguity? And if it were false, why did the very idea of him being engaged unsettle her so deeply? The following day, the office buzzed with even more fervent speculation. Rumors swirled like autumn leaves caught in a turbulent wind. Some colleagues insisted that Julian's rumored fiancée was a dazzling socialite from a prestigious family, while others whispered that she was a mysterious entrepreneur from overseas. No matter which version of the story one believed, the effect was the same. The enigmatic allure of Julian's personal life cast a long shadow over the everyday bustle of Aurora Dynamics. Unable to shake off her relentless curiosity, Clara soon found herself venturing into territories of conversation she had never imagined. In one such instance, during a brief lull in the workday, she found herself offering unsolicited relationship advice to Julian, who was reviewing yet another contract. "If you really are engaged," she ventured hesitantly, "maybe you should plan something truly romantic to surprise her." Julian paused mid-sentence, his eyes lifting to meet hers with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. "Excuse me? I'm serious," she insisted, her voice firm despite the underlying tremor of uncertainty. Julian, ever the composed and measured leader, closed his contract and folded his arms. "You don't seem like the type to worry about these details," he remarked dryly. "But tell me, is this based on proven facts or just another one of your spontaneous theories?" Clara smiled, a glimmer of mischief dancing in her eyes. "Common sense, really," she replied. "For instance, a special dinner, something thoughtfully arranged with a personal touch, could speak volumes." Julian was silent for a moment, clearly considering her words, before finally saying, "All right, I'll plan a dinner." Though his agreement was measured, Clara's heart sank a little when, the very next day, she overheard colleagues discussing a romantic dinner that Julian had supposedly arranged for that evening. The rumor that Aurora Dynamics' formidable CEO was to dine with his mysterious fiancée spread like wildfire. The whispers, the knowing glances, and the subtle nudges in the hallways all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. It was all her fault. Every remark and every furtive glance seemed to cement the notion that the unfolding romantic spectacle was due to her inadvertent suggestion. Overwhelmed by a mix of guilt and determination, Clara decided she had to see the truth for herself. That evening, under a twilight sky tinged with cool hues of indigo and silver, Clara hailed a taxi and discreetly made her way to the upscale restaurant where the dinner was rumored to be taking place. The establishment, known as La Belle Étoile, boasted an ambiance of refined elegance, lavishly decorated tables, soft candlelight flickering on white linen, and an air of exclusivity that both intimidated and intrigued. As soon as Clara stepped inside, she noticed a reserved table, meticulously set for an intimate dinner. Yet, to her astonishment, the table lay empty, the sumptuous spread untouched. Just then, she felt a presence behind her. "Clara?" a familiar voice called softly. Spinning around, she found Julian standing there, his expression a curious blend of amusement and mild exasperation. "What are you doing here?" he asked, clearly intrigued by her unexpected appearance. Stumbling for words, Clara managed to stammer, I heard about the dinner and I just wanted to see if everything was all right." Julian's eyes narrowed slightly as he crossed his arms. "Then tell me, where's my fiancé?" he inquired, his tone more teasing than accusatory. Clara's eyes widened in shock. "I should be asking you that," she retorted, her voice trembling as she searched his face for any hint of deception. With a quiet sigh, Julian retrieved a crisp napkin from his pocket and gently placed it on the vacant table. "There is no fiancé," he declared calmly. The words hung in the air like a sudden deflating balloon. Clara's face flushed a deep shade of red as the realization sank in. "You were messing with me this entire time?" she cried, a mix of relief and indignation coloring her tone. A subtle smile played on Julian's lips as he replied, "I wanted to see how far you'd go with this story." For a brief moment, Clara felt as though she could sink into the floor, mortified by the elaborate ruse. Yet, as she struggled to collect herself, Julian picked up the menu and added, "Since you're already here, we might as well have a real dinner." Though hesitant at first, the warmth of his presence and the unspoken camaraderie between them slowly coaxed a smile onto her face. They sat together once more, the ambiance of La Belle Étoile lending a surreal backdrop to their conversation. Between courses, their dialogue wove between playful banter and genuine insight. At one point, while delicately cutting into her entree, Clara asked, "Tell me something. Why does no one seem to know anything about your personal life? You keep an air of mystery that makes everyone wildly curious." Julian set his silverware down deliberately and offered a small, knowing smile. "The less people know about me," he explained, "the less they have to speculate. And yet, It seems that even my silence can inspire 1,000 wild stories. Clara laughed softly in agreement. I suppose that's why they love gossip so much, she mused. Their conversation meandered effortlessly from office rumors to personal passions. Do you have any hobbies outside of work? Clara inquired, seeking to learn more about the man behind the enigmatic facade. After a thoughtful pause, Julian admitted, I enjoy cooking. It's one of the few times I can focus solely on creating something without the interruptions of emails or endless meetings. Clara's eyes sparkled with surprise. I never would have pictured you in a kitchen, she teased. I imagine you in a crisp apron whipping up gourmet meals that would rival those in a 5-star restaurant. Julian chuckled at the image and shrugged. I prefer simple dishes. It's all about flavor, he responded matter-of-factly. As the evening drew to a close and their plates were cleared, Julian motioned for the waiter to handle the bill. Yet Clara quickly insisted, I should pay for my part. Julian raised an eyebrow playfully. Who invited you here in the first place? He teased. With a light-hearted roll of her eyes, she retorted, You did. Reluctantly, she allowed him to settle the check. Stepping out into the cool night, Clara shivered slightly, regretting that she hadn't brought a jacket. Observing her discomfort, Julian silently removed his own jacket and draped it over her shoulders, a simple, considerate gesture that made her pause in quiet gratitude. You don't have to do this, she murmured softly, though she clutched the fabric close, savoring the subtle warmth and the faint scent of his cologne. You look like you're shivering, he replied, his tone gentle and sincere. Together, they walked in companionable silence to the parking lot. When they reached Julian's sleek car, he leaned casually against the door and said, I have to admit something. Clara looked up, her curiosity piqued. What is it? She asked. With a soft laugh, he replied, You have a natural talent for making a mess of everything around you. Clara burst into laughter. Is that a compliment or a critique? She retorted. Perhaps a bit of both, Julian admitted with a twinkle in his eye. And you, Clara, have a remarkable knack for leaving me utterly speechless. He opened the car door with a graceful gesture, and Clara climbed in, still wrapped in his jacket. The ride back was filled with a warm, comfortable silence, as if both were content to simply share the quiet intimacy of the moment. When Julian finally parked in front of her building, Clara hesitated before stepping out. Thanks for dinner, she managed to say, her voice sincere yet laced with a touch of wonder. Julian nodded in response. It was more interesting than I expected, he replied quietly. As she smiled and offered a parting farewell, Clara's mind swirled with a mix of relief, curiosity, and the unexpected realization that sometimes, even the wildest rumors can lead to moments of genuine connection. Under the cool glow of streetlights and the whisper of a gentle night breeze, the evening's final moments had left an indelible mark on Clara. As she stepped out of Julian's sleek car, she handed back the jacket he'd so kindly draped over her shoulders. Before closing the door behind her, she leaned in, just a fraction, toward him and murmured, "Good night, Julian." He paused, his eyes lingering on her for a long, thoughtful second, before softly replying, "Good night, Clara." That brief exchange carried an unspoken promise, a hint that something in the air had shifted irrevocably, though neither could yet define exactly what had changed. The following morning, as the sun crept over the skyline of New Arcadia, a city reborn with modernity and vibrant energy, Clara tried with all her might to return to her usual work routine at Aurora Dynamics. Yet, an unfamiliar tension clung to her every step. It wasn't merely the memory of a remarkable dinner with Julian, it was the way he now regarded her. His glances, once reserved and curious, now seemed laden with quiet introspection. Whenever he passed by her department, the subtlest smile or the faint lift of an eyebrow made her pulse quicken. Rumors, too, had taken on a life of their own. In hushed corridors and behind closed office doors, whispers swirled about the dinner that had become the subject of relentless speculation. Every time Clara strolled down the hall, she could almost hear the overlapping voices, each conjecture more audacious than the last. The subject of these murmurs was not solely her work with the CEO, but the fabled, romantic dinner that everyone insisted had transpired between her and Julian. During one coffee break, Sophie, a sharp-witted supervisor with an ever-present mischievous glint, approached Clara with a conspiratorial smile. "So, you and the CEO have been going out together?" she teased, nearly causing Clara to drop her cup in surprise. "What? No," Clara stammered, her cheeks flushing as she tried to deflect the question with a laugh. Sophie chuckled. "All right, I believe you. But apparently half the office isn't so sure." Sighing, Clara confessed in a low voice. "I went to the restaurant by chance, just to check on things." Sophie's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "And by chance, he was waiting for you with a reserved table?" she pressed. And Clara rolled her eyes in exasperation. "You're making this worse," she muttered. Leaning in, Sophie whispered, "But really, what happened?" With a resigned sigh, Clara admitted, "He tricked me with that engagement rumor. He claimed he was having a special dinner, and I went to see for myself." Sophie's eyes widened in disbelief. "You actually went after him?" she asked, half in amusement and half in concern. "Not exactly," Clara replied. "I just needed to understand what was going on." Sophie smirked knowingly, adding, "Well, he's smart, or maybe he just enjoys driving you crazy. Or both." Before the conversation could linger, an employee from the executive floor appeared, his brisk tone interrupting their exchange. "Clara Martins? Mr. Fisher wants to see you in his office now." A chill raced down her spine as she exchanged a glance with Sophie, who raised her eyebrows in both excitement and anticipation. Taking a deep breath, Clara made her way to the elevator, her mind bracing itself for whatever news or task awaited her. Inside Julian's private office, a sanctuary of polished glass, muted lighting, and the quiet hum of thoughtful concentration, Julian was engrossed in reviewing a mountain of documents. When he looked up, he gestured for her to sit across from him and closed the door with a decisive click. "Did something happen?" Clara inquired tentatively. Instead of answering immediately, Julian interlaced his fingers and fixed his gaze on her. "I have a proposal for you," he said, his tone neutral but carrying an undercurrent of invitation. Startled, Clara blinked. "That doesn't sound scary at all," she managed to quip. Ignoring her remark, he continued, "I need a date for a corporate event tomorrow night." The words hung in the air, and Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're asking me to be your date for an event?" she echoed, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "Yes," he replied simply. "Is this some kind of trap?" she pressed, crossing her arms defensively. "You know it's not," Julian assured her with quiet confidence. "Why you?" she demanded, her tone a mix of curiosity and incredulity. "Because I need someone who isn't boring," he said matter-of-factly. Clara tilted her head, the compliment hanging ambiguously between praise and tease. "Is that meant as a compliment or an insult?" she asked, half smiling. "Just an observation," he replied evenly. She hesitated, then confessed, "I don't know if this is a good idea. The office is already buzzing with rumors. If I show up with you, they'll have me engaged by tomorrow." Julian's eyes softened slightly as he leaned back in his chair. "It bothers me that people jump to the wrong conclusions. So go and prove them wrong," he said, his tone firm yet not unkind. For a moment, Clara wondered if his insistence was less of an order and more of an earnest desire to defy the gossip that had plagued them both. "Is that an order?" she challenged playfully. "No," he smiled, "but if you say no, I'll have to take someone from the board. And honestly, I'd rather talk to you than anyone else." Taken aback by his sincerity, she hesitated before admitting, "Did you just admit that you enjoy my company?" His slight smile deepened, and he replied, "I admitted that you're not boring." Contemplating his words, she asked, "What kind of event is this, anyway?" "A business gathering, nothing too formal," Julian explained. After a moment's thought, Clara sighed and added, "All right, but on one condition." Raising an eyebrow, Julian inquired, "And what is that?" "You can't leave me alone there. I don't want to be tossed into a sea of strangers," she stated firmly. He nodded in agreement. "Deal," he said. That very evening, Clara spent what felt like hours agonizing over her outfit. She wanted to strike the perfect balance, professional yet not overly formal, so that she could blend in without losing the spark that made her uniquely herself. When she finally arrived at the venue, a grand hall adorned with enormous crystal chandeliers and elegantly arranged tables, she found Julian waiting at the entrance. As always, he looked impeccable, though tonight there was something in his gaze that she couldn't quite place. "Ready to face the evening?" he asked, his tone both reassuring and challenging. "Always," she replied, and together they stepped into the glittering event. Inside, the hall was a spectacle of opulence. Guests in refined attire mingled with sparkling wine glasses in hand. discussing market strategies and investments as though they were reciting poetry. Julian moved with an ease that suggested he belonged, greeting several influential figures with polite nods and engaging in brief, measured conversations. Meanwhile, Clara trailed behind him, acutely aware of every pair of eyes fixed on her. She knew the whispers well. Every curious glance, every subtle smile aimed in her direction was part of the unrelenting office gossip that had now spilled over into her personal life. "Are you all right?" Julian asked quietly as he leaned in during a lull in the conversation, his voice low enough to be private. "I feel like someone's about to investigate me and discover I'm just an intern who spills coffee on reports," she confessed with a nervous laugh. Depressing a smile, he replied, "You underestimate your ability to stand out." Her laugh turned dry as she added, "I'm not sure if that's a compliment or a warning." Just then, an elegant woman approached them with a familiar air. "Julian, darling, it's been so long," she greeted warmly. Her eyes then turned toward Clara with an assessing look. "And who might you be?" Julian maintained his professional composure as he introduced, "This is Clara Martins, my guest for the evening." Clara's heart fluttered at the formality of the introduction. The woman, Vivian Weston, a well-known investor, smiled slyly, remarking, "I see your taste for surprises remains unchanged." Julian only offered a faint smile in response. As Vivian drifted away into the crowd, Clara let out a quiet sigh of relief, wondering silently about the layers of intrigue that now enveloped her world. Before long, a tall, impeccably dressed man with an intrigued smile sidled up to Clara near the drink table. "You're the woman of the moment," he remarked, his voice smooth and confident. Startled, she turned to him. "Excuse me?" he continued. "Everyone here is trying to figure out who you are." Offering a polite smile, she replied, "There isn't much to figure out." He raised an eyebrow. "Hard to believe that someone like you, appearing with Julian Fisher, could be so mysterious." Narrowing her eyes slightly, she asked, "Do you know him well?" "Well enough to know he doesn't usually bring a date to events," he said with a knowing smirk. "And who are you?" she inquired. "Caleb Pierce," he introduced, extending his hand. "I work in the tech sector," he added. "Clara Martins," she responded, surprised that he knew her name so casually. "Intern at Aurora Dynamics, right?" he said. "How do you know that?" she asked, incredulous. "Let's just say I have good sources," Caleb replied, his smile hinting at secrets best left unspoken. Before the conversation could deepen, Julian appeared at their side with a serious expression. "Pierce," he stated curtly, and the two exchanged a tense look that spoke of a complicated past. Sensing the shift in atmosphere, Clara wisely chose to step back. As Caleb lifted his glass in farewell, he said, "It was a pleasure meeting you, Clara. I hope we run into each other again." With that, he departed, leaving her to turn to Julian. "What was that about?" she asked. Julian crossed his arms and remarked, "Caleb likes to stir things up. He always tries to insert himself into conversations." His tone was matter-of-fact, and Clara could only nod in reluctant agreement. Later that evening, as the event drew to a close, the memories of whispered rumors and speculative glances lingered in Clara's mind. Walking beside Julian to the exit, she couldn't help but reflect on how much the night had unfolded, how the dinner, the corporate invitation, and the ensuing interactions had blurred the boundaries between professional duty and personal connection. Stepping out into the cool night once again, she paused before saying her farewell. "Good night, Julian," she said, her voice softer this time. He replied, "Good night, Clara," leaving her with a warmth that belied the complexities of the evening. Under the muted glow of city streetlights and the gentle murmur of nighttime traffic, the evening had drawn to an unexpected close. As Clara stepped out of the sleek black car, she paused at the door. She returned the jacket Julian had so thoughtfully draped over her shoulders, but before closing the door behind her, she leaned in slightly and whispered, "Good night, Julian." For a long moment, he simply watched her, his eyes lingering as if trying to etch the image into memory. Finally, his soft reply broke the silence. "Good night, Clara." That brief farewell carried with it a weight of unspoken promises, a subtle, transformative shift that neither could quite define. The following morning, as the sun rose over the modern skyline of New Arcadia, Clara attempted to slip back into her usual work routine at Aurora Dynamics, yet an unfamiliar tension clung to her throughout the day. It was not merely the memory of the extraordinary dinner with Julian that haunted her. It was the way his glances now seemed to hold layers of meaning. Whereas before he had regarded her with casual intrigue, his looks now bore an intensity that made her heart flutter. Every time he passed by her department, a small, almost imperceptible smile or a lifted brow suggested he was observing something more, a silent analysis of her very being. In the sterile corridors of the executive floor, hushed whispers and furtive glances had become her constant companions. Every departure from the CEO's office was met with knowing looks and quiet giggles from colleagues, as if they were privy to a secret that Clara herself was only beginning to grasp. The office buzzed with rumors about the fabled dinner, the event that had set tongues wagging in every break room and around every water cooler. One afternoon, during a brief coffee break, Sophie, ever the sharp and mischievous supervisor, sidled up to Clara. With a conspiratorial smile, she asked, "So, you and the CEO have been going out together?" The question hit Clara like a jolt. Her cup nearly slipped from her grasp as she stuttered a denial. "What? No, that's not it." Sophie laughed good-naturedly. "All right, I believe you, but apparently half the office does." With a resigned sigh, Clara admitted quietly, "I went to the restaurant by chance, just to see what was really happening." Sophie's eyes danced with amusement as she pressed further. "And by chance he was waiting for you with a reserved table?" Rolling her eyes, Clara muttered, "You're making it all worse." Leaning in, Sophie whispered, "But seriously, what happened?" Clara confessed, "He tricked me with that whole engagement rumor. He claimed there was a special dinner planned, and I..." Curious as ever, I went to check it out." Sophie's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "You actually went after him?" she teased. "Not exactly," Clara replied. "I just needed to understand what was going on." Sophie smirked knowingly. "He's smart. Or maybe he just loves driving you crazy. Perhaps both." Before the conversation could linger further, a voice from the executive floor called out, "Clara Martins, Mr. Fisher wants to see you in his office now." A chill ran down her spine as she exchanged a glance with Sophie, whose raised eyebrows betrayed both excitement and apprehension. Taking a deep breath, Clara headed for the elevator, mentally bracing herself for whatever awaited her behind the closed door of the CEO's office. That evening, as twilight settled over New Arcadia, Clara spent hours agonizing over her outfit. Determined to look both professional and comfortable, she chose an ensemble that balanced her youthful spirit with the demands of corporate formality. When she finally arrived at the venue, a grand hall adorned with sweeping crystal chandeliers and opulently arranged tables, she found Julian waiting at the entrance. As always, he looked impeccably dressed, but tonight there was a subtle change in his expression, an intensity in his gaze that made her heart flutter. "Ready to face the evening?" he asked, his tone warm, yet edged with anticipation. "Always," she replied, and together they stepped into the bustling event. Inside, the hall was a testament to luxury. Elegant guests mingled effortlessly, discussing market trends and business ventures over clinking glasses of fine wine. Julian navigated the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging polite nods and measured greetings with influential figures. Meanwhile, Clara trailed behind him, acutely aware of the curious glances and whispered speculations. Every eye seemed to be fixed on her, on the intern who had unexpectedly become the CEO's date. During a lull in the conversation, Julian leaned in close and asked quietly, "Are you all right?" His voice, low and intimate, cut through the surrounding chatter. "I feel like someone's about to investigate me and find out I'm just an intern who spills coffee on reports," she confessed with a wry laugh. He suppressed a smile, replying, "You underestimate your ability to stand out." She chuckled dryly. "I'm not sure that's a compliment or a warning." Before she could dwell further on her unease, an elegant woman approached them, her tone both familiar and warm. "Julian, darling, it's been so long," she greeted. Her eyes then shifted toward Clara with a curious gleam. "And who is this?" Julian replied smoothly. "This is Clara Martins, my guest for the evening." The introduction sent a ripple of intrigue through the nearby guests, and as Vivian Weston, a prominent investor, smiled slyly, she remarked, "I see your taste for surprises remains unchanged." Julian only offered a faint, knowing smile. After Vivian drifted back into the crowd, a tall man in a tailored suit sidled up to Clara near the refreshment table. "You're the woman of the moment," he said smoothly. Startled, she turned, and he continued, "Everyone here is trying to figure out who you are." Offering a polite smile, Clara replied, There isn't much to figure out." The man raised an eyebrow. Hard to believe that someone appearing with Julian Fisher could be so mysterious. "Do you know him well?" "Well enough to know he rarely brings a date," he answered, his smirk hinting at hidden connections. "And who might you be?" she asked. "Caleb Pierce," he introduced himself, extending his hand with a confident air. "I work in the tech sector," he added. "Clara Martins, intern at Aurora Dynamics, right?" he guessed. Surprised at his familiarity, she asked, "How do you know that?" "Let's just say, I have good sources," he replied enigmatically. Before the conversation could delve deeper, Julian appeared with a stern look. "Pierce," he stated curtly. A brief, tense exchange of glances passed between the two men, laden with history and unspoken rivalry. Sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Clara wisely stepped back. Caleb raised his glass in a final courteous gesture. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Clara. I hope our paths cross again." Turning to Julian, she asked, "What was that about?" Julian crossed his arms and replied matter-of-factly, "Caleb likes to stir things up. He always tries to insert himself where he doesn't belong." Their conversation soon dissolved into the formal rhythms of the evening. As the event drew to a close and the formalities were left behind, Clara felt an odd mix of relief and apprehension. In the car ride home, the silence between her and Julian was thicker than usual. Breaking the quiet, she ventured, "So, Caleb Pierce seems to enjoy provoking you?" Julian kept his eyes fixed on the road as he replied, "He likes to test limits." Leaning in slightly, Clara asked, "And what exactly was he trying to test with me?" Julian's gaze flickered toward her briefly. "That's something only he can answer," he said cryptically. Realizing further discussion was futile, Clara sighed and stared out the window as the city lights blurred past, each one a reminder of a night that had been far more revealing than she had ever anticipated. The following morning, waking with a strange mix of emotions, Clara found that the events of the previous night continued to reverberate within her. At the office, the rumors had only intensified. Whispers floated through the corridors, some even suggesting that she had been promoted to the CEO's official date. A colleague teased, "So, our dear intern is now the CEO's date. I've never seen him bring anyone to an event before." Sophie, with a mischievous glint in her eye, leaned over and whispered, "Are you sure there isn't more to it?" Clara rolled her eyes, replying, "Don't you all have work to do?" "We do, but gossip is so much more entertaining." Despite her best efforts to focus on her tasks, an email notification caught her eye. The subject read, "CEO's office." Her heart skipped a beat as she closed her laptop, grabbed her notebook, and headed to the executive floor. Entering Julian's office once more, she found him already seated at his desk, his face unreadable as he motioned for her to sit. "This sounds serious," she ventured, crossing her arms. Julian leaned back, his eyes fixed on hers as he began. "Caleb Pierce called me this morning." Clara blinked in surprise. "And what did he want?" she asked. "He asked about you," Julian replied. "About me?" she echoed. "Yes, he wants to offer you a job at his company." Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. "What?" she managed. Julian maintained his serious expression. "He thinks you have potential." A nervous laugh escaped her. "But I'm just an intern." Julian's gaze narrowed slightly. "Do you really believe that?" he challenged. "Well, yes," she hesitated. Shaking his head, Julian continued. "Clara, you don't realize the impact you have. Do you plan to accept the offer?" Her face flushed. "Do you want me to?" he pressed, his eyes searching hers. "I want to know what you want," he finally said. After a long pause, she admitted, "I don't know. It all happened so fast. And I don't even trust Caleb." Julian nodded. "Then we're on the same page." Studying her carefully, he added, "Why do I feel like you already know I suspected this would happen?" Resting his elbows on the table, he confided, "Caleb never does anything without an ulterior motive. He's trying to use you to get to me." Clara swallowed hard. "This sounds more serious than I thought." A heavy silence filled the room until, with a wry smile, she said, "I guess I should get ready for another chapter in this corporate soap opera." Julian smirked. "You've been part of it for a long time." Rising, she declared, "Don't worry, Julian. I'm not going anywhere." Later that evening, as the office had emptied and only a few lights remained aglow, Clara heard a soft notification. A new email message. The subject was blank, but its urgency was unmistakable. "Can you meet me on the rooftop in 10 minutes?" Her pulse quickened as she quickly gathered her things and made her way to the rooftop. Opening the door to the cool night air, she found Julian standing there with his back to her, gazing out over the glittering cityscape. "You called me?" she asked hesitantly. Slowly he turned, and for the first time, Clara noticed the nervous tension in his eyes. "I've spent the last few days trying to find the best way to say this," he began, taking a deep breath. Before she could ask him to elaborate, Julian stepped forward and, with deliberate grace, knelt on one knee. Reaching into his pocket, he produced a small black box. As it opened, a diamond ring caught the light, sparkling like a beacon of hope and promise. "I'm asking you to marry me," he declared softly. Under the shimmering glow of a late-night cityscape, with distant car headlights painting streaks of amber across the pavement, the moment had come to redefine everything. Standing on the edge of the rooftop, the cool wind tugged gently at Clara's hair as she tried to steady her racing heart. Moments earlier, had knelt on one knee, a gesture so sudden and dramatic that time itself seemed to falter. His eyes, usually so controlled and calculating, now shone with unguarded vulnerability. With deliberate calm, he slowly opened a small black box, revealing a dazzling diamond ring that caught every stray beam of light like a tiny sun. "Clara Martins," he said softly, his voice a blend of sincerity and quiet laughter. "Will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, Clara blinked in disbelief, her mind swirling with a cocktail of shock, joy, and uncertainty. Did you hit your head somewhere?" she managed to ask, half-teasing as she pressed her hands to her face in a brief moment of disbelief. Julian chuckled, a sound that was both gentle and resolute, though his eyes never left hers. "No," he replied, his tone firm. "This is no joke, Clara. Are you sure about this?" With a tenderness that belied his commanding presence, he reached out and took her hand. In that instant, a surge of emotion overwhelmed her, as if every moment leading up to now had been building toward this life-altering question. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Julian continued, his voice a quiet vow against the soft hum of the night. Clara's heart pounded in her ears. "But why?" she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. Julian's smile softened as he answered, "Because you make me laugh, because you challenge me, because ever since you walked into my life, everything has been more interesting." His words, sincere and full of warmth, washed over her like a comforting tide. Amid the intensity of the moment, she let out a nervous laugh. "That sounds more like a job offer than a marriage proposal," she teased, still in disbelief at the surreal scene unfolding before her. Julian shook his head, his laughter mingling with the quiet murmur of the city below. "Clara Martins, will you marry me?" he repeated, his tone now both playful and solemn. As her eyes darted to the ring, a sparkling promise of a future filled with hope and adventure, she felt a profound certainty settling in her soul. "Yes," she breathed, her voice barely audible yet resolute. In that instant, Julian carefully slipped the ring onto her finger. With a swift, heartfelt motion, he stood and pulled her into an embrace that was both fierce and tender, their kiss igniting an electric connection that threatened to make her knees buckle. Unbeknownst to them, a small crowd of colleagues had gathered at the glass doors of the rooftop, their hushed voices rising to cheers and applause as they witnessed the scene through reflective panes. Startled, Clara pulled away just enough to catch a glimpse of her co-workers' incredulous faces. "You were watching?" she exclaimed, half horrified, half amused. Sophie, always the bold one, grinned widely. "Of course, this is a historic event," she declared. "Now there's no doubt about the rumors." Julian laughed, drawing Clara close once more. "I guess the whispers were true after all," he said, his tone light yet laced with an undercurrent of mischief. Clara rolled her eyes good-naturedly and smiled. "Yes, but at least now the rumors are true," she replied, her voice filled with a mix of relief and amusement. The following months blurred past in a whirlwind of shared glances, whispered congratulations, and the steady, comforting rhythm of a life newly entwined. Their wedding, held just a few months later, turned out to be everything neither of them had anticipated, lavish in its simplicity and rich with meaning. Julian had insisted that their wedding be memorable, yet he despised ostentation. They found a compromise, an outdoor ceremony held in the picturesque gardens of Evergreen Meadows, a verdant expanse reimagined for celebration. White flowers and soft twinkling lights created an atmosphere of warm charm. Clara wore a dress that was simple yet stunning, one that captured the understated beauty of her character, while Julian looked every bit the refined leader, his gaze soft as he awaited her at the end of the aisle. As she walked slowly toward him, her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and a touch of disbelief. Each step felt like the culmination of years of chaos and serendipity, all leading to this perfect moment. The ceremony was intimate and heartfelt, punctuated by vows that mingled deep emotion with playful humor. When it was Clara's turn, she took Julian's hand and looked into his eyes. "I promise to love you on both the good days and the bad," she declared, her voice steady despite the tears glistening in her eyes. "I promise to always carry an allergy pill in case you order shrimp without thinking." A ripple of laughter spread among the guests, and when Julian replied, "And I promise to love you in every moment, even when you reorganize my pen drawer without my permission," the room burst into joyous mirth. Finally, as they exchanged the long-awaited "I do" and sealed their vows with a passionate kiss, it felt as if the entire world had momentarily faded away, leaving only their shared joy. For a while, life as a married couple unfolded with the sort of quiet harmony that belied the chaotic beginnings of their journey. Clara and Julian managed to balance work and personal life, finding comfort in each other's presence despite the constant buzz of corporate life at Aurora Dynamics. Yet, as with every good story, change was on the horizon. One day, while Clara was carefully organizing reports at her desk, her eyes caught sight of a small white box. A pregnancy test. Her heart pounded as she blinked, taking a deep breath before glancing at it once more. The result hadn't changed. She was pregnant. In that moment, her heart raced with a blend of excitement and a touch of apprehension about the future. "How do I tell him?" she wondered, her mind swirling with possibilities. That evening, when Julian finally returned home after a long day at the office, he found Clara sitting on the couch with an envelope clutched in her hands, a playful hint at the surprise she had prepared. "What's this?" he asked, removing his jacket and sitting beside her. Smiling, she handed him the envelope, whispering, "A little surprise." With trembling hands, Julian opened it and pulled out a piece of paper. Clearing his throat, he read aloud, "Congratulations, you've been promoted to daddy." For a moment, his eyes widened in disbelief as he blinked, trying to process the joyful news. "Are you serious?" he finally asked, his voice soft and incredulous. Clara nodded, biting her lip to steady her own bubbling emotions. Without hesitation, Julian pulled her into a tight embrace. "I can't believe it," he murmured, laughter mingling with tears. "I didn't believe it either until I checked the test 3 times. He then gently cupped her face in his hands and kissed her softly, murmuring, "You just made me the happiest man in the world." Clara's laughter mixed with joyful tears as she hugged him back, feeling a profound sense of completeness that she had never dared to imagine. "Well," Julian added with a playful chuckle, "you better get ready, because it looks like our life is about to get even crazier." And with that, the two of them stood together, wrapped in each other's arms, knowing that their chaotic, unpredictable journey had now found a home in one another. In that moment, as the night drew to a close and the glow of the city receded into a soft darkness, Clara realized that every twist, every unexpected turn, from awkward office mishaps to the surreal rooftop proposal, had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Her once chaotic life had transformed into a tapestry of love, laughter, and shared dreams. As she looked up into Julian's eyes, she knew without a shadow of doubt that his name would forever be intertwined with her own, and that their story, full of spontaneity, humor, and deep connection, was just beginning. A year later, their lives had settled into a rhythm that was both challenging and blissfully fulfilling. The rumors and office gossip had gradually faded into the background, replaced by genuine admiration and respect for the couple who had defied expectations. Their work at Aurora Dynamics continued, now marked by a subtle harmony and mutual support that was evident to all who witnessed it. Yet, the memory of that fateful night on the rooftop lingered, a constant reminder of how fragile and beautiful life could be. As Clara sat by her window one quiet morning, watching the city awaken beneath a pale sky, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The chaotic moments of her past, the spilled coffee, the mistaken engagements, the relentless office chatter seemed like distant echoes compared to the resounding certainty she now felt. In Julian's arms, amidst the laughter and shared dreams, she had discovered a love that transcended the ordinary. And as she prepared to face a new day, one filled with both the familiar challenges of corporate life and the promise of an expanding family, Clara couldn't help but smile. Her chaos had found a home, and that home was built on the unwavering foundation of love, trust, and the delightful unpredictability of life. From a clumsy intern who stumbled into a CEO's life, literally, Clara found herself on an unexpected journey. A journey where honesty, humor, and the courage to be herself led her to love, family, and a place to call home. Julian, once distant and guarded, learned to laugh, love, and open his heart, thanks to the beautiful chaos Clara brought into his world. Maybe happiness doesn't come from perfect plans, but from imperfect moments shared with the right person, the one who sees you, chooses you, and stays, even when everything around you feels like a mess. Do you believe love can grow from the most unexpected moments? If you were in Clara's shoes, would you take a chance on someone like Julian? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you felt about their story. And if you've ever had your own chaotic but magical love story, share it with us. Who knows, the next story might be yours. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss the next story that just might change your heart.